Hi, I'm Cindy with Earth Science Resources, and today we're speaking with Hunter Danque. He is a PhD student at the Colorado School of Mines.
My name's Hunter Danque. I'm a husband, a father. I love to read. I love to travel, and I like to define myself in those terms rather than kind of what I do. That was something that I learned when I lived in Australia for a year. I found that people would define themselves by, "Hey, I love to surf," or instead of, "Hey, I'm an accountant," or some such. So ever since then, I've always tried to introduce myself by the things that I feel define me personally and kind of separate from what I do. What do I do? Well, currently I'm a PhD student at the Colorado School of Mines and Space Resources program. So I see this as kind of a career transition from doing industry, geoscience as exploration geophysicist at Danque and Oxy for a number of years, and really enjoyed those roles. Loved doing the geoscience, loved the travel opportunities that it brought me. But yeah, I've always been passionate about space and space science, and I've just come on this wonderful opportunity to go back to graduate school, and I've just completed a Master of Science in Space Resources, and starting up a PhD in Space Resources. I just finished my qualifiers a week or so ago. And so some of the research that I'm working on now in my PhD program, so just starting up, but really focusing on the moon, as you may be able to tell by my virtual background, and have a particular interest in some of the cold traps in the permanently shadowed regions at the lunar poles, where volatiles like water ice and CO2 and other things collect and are stable for millions of years in these temperatures that are like between around 100, less than 110 Kelvin, which is really, really cold. So I'm also interested in the kind of the thermal modeling and how energy, what little energy there is in a cold trap, how it gets into the cold trap and how it propagates through the subsurface. So currently I'm working on some thermal modeling of these cold traps at the lunar poles. There's a short version, there's a long version. I'll try for somewhere in the middle. I had a rather unusual upbringing. My parents are commercial fishermen, and so I spent a lot of time at sea, or going to sea when I was 2 weeks old for the first time, and went to sea for much of the first 5 years of my life. And my dad then switched from being a commercial fisherman to a private investigator, and we moved to the Texas area, and I was homeschooled. My mom was a Montessori teacher, and so my parents taught me at home growing up. We also had a rather unusual period. Like I spent a number of years, my dad, my little sister, and I living essentially in national forests, like for many years, living without electricity or running water, and getting books from the local library as our education and entertainment. And did that for a number of years, and then decided that I wanted to work. So I started a small construction business. I had a bunch of different odd jobs during my late teens, but when I was 19, I decided I wanted a construction business, and so I spun up a business I called Hunter's Equine Construction, and I built barns and fences and things of that sort. I learned the skill by trading construction for horseback riding lessons for my little sister, and she eventually became a horse trainer. And so she got the skills to be a horse trainer. I got the skills to do construction, and that worked really well. I was able to save up enough money through that to attend well, it's now Lone Star College, and back then it was the North Harris Montgomery Community College District, and I started attending classes at the Tomball campus, and so I attended classes at Tomball and Montgomery campuses, and I was introduced to geology at the Tomball campus. There was a professor there, Dr. Madeley. He was just amazing. Like, he inspired me to love geology and geoscience. And like in an intro class, we got a van or several vans, and we went out to Big Bend and did like a weekend long trip through Big Bend, looking at tuff and faults and volcanic plugs and all kinds of cool things out in the Big Bend area. And stopped by the McDonald Observatory, and it's just an amazing trip. I was like, oh my gosh, you can do stuff like this at school, and there's like a profession out there where you might get to travel and spend time outside. I was like, oh, I'm all in. This is great. But really enjoyed my physical and historical geology classes at Lone Star, and was able to transfer into the University of Texas in Austin. But I love space, and I love space science. So I actually transferred into the aerospace engineering program at the University of Texas. I spent about a semester in the aerospace program and realized it probably wouldn't be a good fit for my personality and my love of being outdoors. Not that much opportunity for travel or for working outside in aerospace. So I switched to geology and ended up majoring in geophysics at the University of Texas in Austin. So did my undergraduate there, spent a year study abroad in Australia, which is an amazing experience. I did most of my field geology courses in Australia. So going out into the outback with kangaroos and emu following along behind you as you're looking at samples. I remember one flock of emu that followed us as we were crossing, and every time we'd like hit a rock or dig it into the area, as soon as we'd walk away, the emus would go over there and kind of scratch around and look like, did they find something to eat here? Like, there's nothing but rocks here. You could see the emus thinking that. But I had a great time in Australia and got a lot of travel in. And that's kind of my first time traveling abroad after all the travel I did as a kid. So did that for undergrad, attended the University of Texas for graduate school, got a degree in geophysics, did Antarctic aerogeophysics. My thesis was studying the West Antarctic ice sheet, and particularly looking for hydrothermal systems under the West Antarctic ice sheet that could be analogs for potential hydrothermal systems under ice sheets on Mars. So that's how I tried to bring in my love of planetary science to the most extreme environment I could find on Earth to study. So I had a great time with that. Did not learn much that was applicable to the oil industry, where I eventually got a job, but got to work with radar data, potential field data, gravity, magnetics, laser altimetry, and so it was a great experience, and loved it. Loved those years. I graduated at a fairly fortuitous time for getting a job in the geosciences. I graduated around 07, 08 with my master's, and so I had 4 job offers coming out of grad school, and I ended up choosing, I think, it was the second lowest offer, but it was the one that said, hey, you can travel the world if you come with us. We'll put you on a ship in Indonesia next month if you come work with us. And a couple of the other offers, or the big oil companies, are like, oh, you'll have to study for a year or two before you really get to do anything. We've got our own internal training and onboarding program. I was like, oh, I can't do another year or two at school. I want to travel. So I took the lower offer and traveled and spent most of the next year in Indonesia on little ships, surveying the seafloor. That survey program, with many ships and many people working on it, we ended up surveying, I think it was nearly 400,000 square miles of the seafloor off of Indonesia. And it's an active tectonic zone. And I don't know if you get a chance to pull up some seafloor data in your class or not, but it's just amazing to see the seafloor with things like multi-beam bathymetry. So it's acoustic sound waves that the ship sends out and then return, and then you can make a DEM or digital elevation model of the seafloor from it. So see these cool faults. There's no vegetation in the way, no cactus. So you can see everything really well, and you've got mud volcanoes, and our goal of that program is to find hydrocarbon seeps and take geochemical samples of them. And it was a poor man's way of figuring out what the petroleum system was like, getting samples of the petroleum system. So I had a lot of fun with that for a number of years. I was working with a small consulting company, AOA Geophysics. And so when I wasn't offshore collecting data, I was working onshore, mostly doing geohazard reports. These are reports that companies, large companies, would contract us to do when they're planning to drill an oil well or lay a pipeline or things of that sort. And essentially they get a third party that goes through all the data that's available or collect new data, integrate it, create a report that fits the government requirements, and that will tell them of any potential hazards that might damage the well. So essentially, it's a way of making the wells, having them drilled safer. And so we really enjoyed doing that and did it for a number of years, both at AOA, and then AOA got bought out by Fugro. And so I worked at Fugro for a number of years. Eventually, I made the shift to Anadarko and worked exploration geophysics in South Africa and West Africa and Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico, and saw some great geology and really learned about kind of the deeper section and seismic data and how to integrate it and understand the hydrocarbon system. And then in the last year or two, I was with Anadarko and Oxy. I transferred into the machine learning R&D group, which is called the AIT, or Advanced Analytics and Emerging Technologies. And so I worked with data scientists, helping to train models and to provide feedback on the output of various machine learning models. And that was a lot of fun too. And then Anadarko was bought out by Oxy, and I'd started the space resources program already. I was working towards a certificate in space resources at the Colorado School of Mines, and then opportunity came up to take a severance package, and so I accepted that, and have been a full-time student at the Colorado School of Mines, working on space science, lunar science, with an emphasis on space resources. How can you find the resources that will help reduce the cost of accessing space and getting to various places in space, and hopefully bringing the cost down to the point that it's accessible to the everyday person and people from as many countries as possible. First step is lowering launch cost to orbit. The next step is being able to refuel in orbit from fuel that's already up there. So that's kind of the two-step program, and I want to work on the next step. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they're doing great on the lowering launch cost stuff. So I want to work on the next thing. So that's the medium to long version. What advice could I give my younger self? So I think as you may be able to tell by the how I got there question, like there's a strong emphasis on the kind of the technical, the skill building in what I described, but what may not have showed up there, but what I have found to be really the most valuable in my life is building what are called the soft skills, like being able to communicate effectively, both with friends, with peers, with your spouse, being able to have the kind of emotional intelligence, be able to understand what you're feeling, and be able to process those feelings in a healthy way, and be able to experience the full spectrum of emotions, and not to kind of dwell or try to control them. And I would say those communication skills are things that you learn with time, and I wish I'd had better ones early on. Like it wasn't bad, but I can do so much better now that I have more practice than I did back then. And they're just so important for having really satisfying relationships in one's life. Um, uh, uh, Very fortunate in the relationships that I have with my wife and with my daughter and with my little sister. I may have neglected to mention it earlier, but my sister and I are really good friends, but we're also co-owners of a horse boarding and training business on the north side of Houston. When I got the job with Danque, my sister and I bought 50 acres up near Lake Conroe, and we have a horse boarding and training facility up there with 40 some horses, and my sister trains them, and my wife, my daughter, and I go up there frequently on the weekends and spend time with my family and hanging out with the goats and things of that sort. But really being able to communicate clearly and effectively, I'd say, is one of the key skills to satisfaction and kind of ongoing happiness in life and in having positive relationships with the people around me. So I would say that would be kind of a thing to keep in mind, especially in the really technical and science-oriented fields like geology or engineering or any of the other sciences, where most of the focus is on improving the math, improving the physics, improving the tools, and I'd say equally important are improving the how do you get along with everyone else in the world tools. So I would say that's advice to younger self.